If there's something you wanted to have happen in OBS and you can't find it in Streamer.bot, OBS Raw is probably your answer. You don't need to know how to code in order to use it. So today I'm going to show you the generator that builds the JSON file for you that you can stick in with the OBS Raw sub action. I'm going to give you 3 real-world examples that you will be able to use. First one is to be able to mute and unmute things in OBS, such as the global audio devices that don't appear in the sub actions tab in Streamer.bot. The second thing I want to do is show you how you can set the input volume, moving it up and down for maybe your mic, your music, letting you kind of adjust that on the fly in OBS Studio. And then the last thing I want to show you is how you can kind of change up with the replay buffer and do some things with it to kind of bring it to your advantage. And then we're going to show you the real superpower of this whole thing using Streamer.bot variables inside that OBS Raw so it becomes dynamic. So all OBS Raw is basically the same thing as a sub action where it's just sending another piece of information to OBS to do something. So one thing you need to know before you get started is that you do need to know the exact names of things in OBS Studio, which is whatever you named them. So you have to pay attention to capitalization, punctuation, and know that you are making it identical. Otherwise, OBS Raw isn't going to be able to find it. Now, the next thing, probably not as simple. I'm going to give you a quick crash course on JSON. So one of the first things to know is that JSON itself is not data. It's a description of the data. What we would be looking at here is the request type. We are asking OBS to give us the input volume, and the request data, what we're asking is we want to know the input volume of this specific input. And when I would send that, it would send back what I requested, that the input volume of this thing is 0. Now, I'm sure that just went completely over your head. Don't worry. That's why you have the OBS Raw Generator to work with. So when you open up the OBS Raw Generator, over here is all the requests that you can make. Some of them are to get information from OBS Studio. Others are to send information to OBS Studio. So for instance, if I wanted to see what's currently available on my OBS Studio that I'm connected to, the request that's going out is already filled in for me. Get the scene collection list. And we are saying we don't really care what's in there, we just want it all. And so when I hit this send request, it's coming back with exactly what is inside my OBS Studio. These are all the scenes that I currently have created. So don't get too freaked out when it comes to, you have code in front of you and what do I do with it? The generator is going to take care of most of it. There are going to be certain things that you will have to kind of work with in order to get what you want out of it. And that's where I'm going to do these demonstrations in a very specific way to help you understand how to work this and, well, how to tailor it for you. To get started with the OBS Raw Generator, let me explain to you how to connect to it. You're going to see at the top right that there is host, port, and password. These 3 items are what you need in order to connect. However, you may not fully understand what all we're talking about with this. When it comes to the host part, we're talking about Streamer.bot, and that is the IP address right here that we are bound to in our WebSocket server. So here, 127.0.0.1. 127.0.0.1. This is basically saying we are hooking into this instance of Streamer.bot. The rest comes in OBS Studio. Where you're going to go is to Tools, and you're going to come down to where it says WebSocket Server Settings. In here is going to show you the settings for your OBS Studio. So here I have set this to server port 1313. Yours is likely going to be different because I have multiple instances of OBS Studio for tutorial uses, for building things for people, for my own streams, for YouTube recordings. I have a lot of different OBSs for different reasons. But with the OBS Studio WebSocket server, you're going to take the port number that's here and put it into the port number here. This is going to make sure that we are connecting to the OBS that we're using. So remember, host, that's Streamer.bot. Port comes from your OBS Studio. The password also comes from OBS Studio, this server password, which if you hit show connect info, it'll appear where it says server password. So just hit the copy button for the password. You can close those out and then put the password in here. Once you've done that, just hit connect and you should be connected. Here it shows me OBS Studio, WebSocket, everything's connected as it should be. Once you have your OBS connected and your StreamerBot connected, anything you test in here will actually function on OBS Studio. So be mindful of that as you're playing with things, that whatever you trigger while it's connected will occur in OBS Studio. All right, let's go ahead and get into our first example, which is going to be muting a global audio source. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to where I can find the volume, which is going to be under inputs. And so if I flip through here, what I'm going to find is toggle input mute. This is what I want to use. It's already going to fill in for me. This is the request I want to toggle the input mute. But what am I going to toggle it to? Well, that's where I come and I go to where it says value. And I'm going to find what I want to use, which is mic auxiliary. So it's going to fill that in. This is the input name. This is what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy OBS Raw. Now, something I want to point out here is there is two things here. There's copy CPH and copy OBS Raw. You're going to use copy OBS Raw because that is what is going to be used inside the sub action that you're going to use to make these things happen. Copy CPH is actually for coding in C#, and they are two different structures. You can't interchange them because if you copy CPH and throw it in there, JSON's going to look at it like, what? It's like speaking Klingon to somebody who's never seen Star Trek and is so into Lord of the Rings. It just isn't going to make sense. So I hit the copy OBS Raw. We're going to go back to StreamerBot. And all I have to do then is paste this in here with either Control V or right click paste. And it's going to appear like this. And this is basically the JSON you need. Now, if you hit format, it's going to put it into the more accepted looking version of it, but it's not going to affect the overall performance. Now, there is a test button down here. That test button is different from the triggers test button in StreamerBot. This test button is only going to do the request that basically that data says. Now, if it is something that we are to get information from OBS in order to move forward, it'll run that request, but you're not going to see anything because you haven't told anything in StreamerBot of where to record that information. So this test button is literally just to see if things are going to OBS Studio. That's about it. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and add a test trigger button so we can see if this actually works. So now you can see down here is my microphone, and right now it is currently active. If I was to hit test trigger, it actually did mute it. It toggled it off. So this OBS Raw does work. And then if I hit test again, it'll toggle it back on, which means that this is working exactly as intended. And sometimes that's as simple as some of the OBS Raw Generator really needs to be, is just copying and pasting. But let's say we wanted to get a little bit further into this. That brings me to the second part, where we're going to set the input volume. Back in our Raw Generator, what we can do first is get input volume. Now we're going to go ahead and work with the mic and auxiliary just because, well, that's what I've got in there right now. So what I want to do is I actually want to see how this is structured so I can understand it better. When I send the request, it's going to show me what it labels things as so I can understand what I need to possibly label it as. In this case, the volume is input volume dB. I don't just simply say set the volume. I say it needs to be input volume dB. That's what it's going to define it as. What I'm going to do now is go to set input volume. And here, this is the key thing that I want to change, which would be the volume. So let's say I wanted to make it less volume than what I've got. So I'll say I'm going to set it at -20 dB. So I'm not going to worry about this part. I'm going to leave it null. I just want to do input volume dB, which is what I'm doing in here. And so I'm actually going to see if I can take that out and it would still work. And we're going to do this to the mic and auxiliary. So what this should do when I send the request is it should take my mic and aux and bring it down to a -20 decibel. So when I send the request, it sure did do that. It is now -20. Now, if I wanted to set it back to 0, I'm going to change the value to 0 and then hit send request, and it jumps back up. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to copy the OBS Raw, and I'm going to bring up StreamerBot. I'm going to go ahead and change this and let me format. So let's say I want to make sure that the volume gets set to, well, let's say -10. I'll change this to mic and auxiliary volume. So now if I hit test, it does drop down to 10. It is working correctly. And so when I need to change this to what I want, all I need to remember is that this is the part I want to change. Okay, so far we've learned how to copy and paste over, and we now know that you can change certain values to do what you would like it to do. But let's say you wanted to make this volume trigger not just a set volume, but you wanted to be able to make it more dynamic. So let me describe how this is going to work. First, we're going to get the input volume as it is. We need to know where we're starting from. Then we also need to be able to say how much should we increase or decrease by when we actually know how much is there. Then we have to tell it, we know the value, here's what it needs to be. So this is going to be a few different steps, but just bear with me because it will be worth it. Okay, so our first step is going to be, again, getting the input volume. And what we can do is we can copy this OBS Raw, because when we send it, it should send back what we have here. So we bring up Streamer.bot. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to replace this to get the input volume of the mic that we're working with right here. And I'm going to say, get the mic aux volume. Now, one thing you can do is do the variable prefix here as OBS Raw. I'm actually just going to go ahead and put it as mic. And what that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and give me a variable of this. Now, you're probably wondering how we're going to get the information we need from this. There's actually a very simple way. All you got to do is on your trigger, just hit test trigger. Then you're going to come over to where the action history is. And you'll click the latest one you just ran. And this is going to show you exactly what you're going to be referencing. So for us, we need mic.inputVolumeDB, and it will give us this value then. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set an argument. We're going to call this startVol. That's the name of the variable we want to save this as. And the value we just had. And if you need to, you can always copy variable name to make it easy. So I would just go in here and paste. And don't forget your percent signs on either side to tell Streamer.bot that this is a variable we are working with. So the start volume is this. Now we go back to our OBS Raw Generator, and we're going to do set input volume. So again, we want to do it on our mic and auxiliary. I'm going to go ahead and remove the input volume mole because that's not what I want to control. So I click out off, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this blank while I copy. Now I'm going to add another OBS Raw instance here, set mic. And in here, I get it in. I'm going to format it. Now, right now, it's showing that the volume is going to be 0 because we didn't enter anything into it. So now what we have to do is take our argument that we know this is, and let's say we want to do it 5 decimals anytime we click this. How are we going to do that? Well, I can come back into my argument here, and I can actually change the value. And this is a time when it would be very handy to have the docs.streamer.bot up. And so what I'll do is I'll actually come up to where it says search, and I'm going to input math. And here with math, this is going to tell you how you can actually do subtract 5 with your variable. And so as I scroll down, what we're going to wind up doing is using this within the subjection. So in this example, it's going to show you that on either side, you need to have your dollar signs. What we need is really this, where we have our variable between the percent signs. We're going to do a math equation, and then we're going to set a number, and that's what we want to do. So then back in here, what I'm going to change this to, so I'm going to go ahead and add the math in here with that, put a space, minus, and 5. Then I'll close the parentheses and add the dollar sign. So what I'm telling this variable name to do is I want you to take this information I've got here that we got previously, and I want you to subtract 5 from it and make it this. So now we're setting this variable to this equation. So all we need to do in here is we add a quote, our parentheses, start vol, percent sign, and quotation. Now, right now it's saying 401, it doesn't have a number. That's normal for testing, but if we can hit OK and it closes, that means it accepts how we have put that together. So we're sitting at a volume of -10. If I hit test, this should go down to 15, and it did. Now it's at -15. I have just made a way to T-grease my volume every single time I have triggered this. Now I need it to go the opposite direction. So what do? I just go over here and I hit duplicate, come down to this new copy. I'd rename it, but in here, I'm going to go and change this from a -5 to a positive 5. Now we're adding 5 every time, and the rest of it can stay the same because this is still the same way we want to move things in our whole setup. And since this is an argument, it's only going to be contained within here. It's not going to affect this other action because that's not how arguments work. Arguments stay within just that action. So here, now I can raise the volume by 5 every time I trigger it, giving me now the ability to change the volume. A couple good things to note before we get any further is that anything that could be considered a word or a sentence or something you would present as a sentence or word, you would put quotations around it. Now that can include your variables, but mainly it would be things to make a sentence, such as déjà vu would be a word. Or we leave it blank to do sort of a catch-all, or we use the number 42 as if it was part of an actual sentence and not to define anything within our JSON. Now, if we're going to use a number, and that is to define something within our settings, such as we've done with our volume, then we're not going to use quotations around that. And that would be the same when it comes to something as a true and false, or if we're going to be referring to something as a null reference, meaning there's no information within it. And the last thing I want to mention here is commas, and this is going to function similarly to the English language, where you're going to put a comma after every individual item that you're listing off. So instead of saying John, Joe, Susie, and Jane are doing these things, we're taking this entire section, and the comma is basically indicating, okay, that's one person, then the next person, then the next person. And then when we get to the end, you don't put that last comma. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you my replay buffer example. Now, this is going to use a combination of different techniques, so it's a little bit more complex, and this is where you also have to learn to pay attention to what you're looking at. So let me walk you through what I do with this replay buffer. So first things first is I do have a video playing currently, and yes, it's one of the YouTube videos I wasn't able to release. The important thing is that I have this playing, and I have the replay buffer enabled. So let's go ahead and add a new action, and I'm going to call this replay buffer. Now, in the replay buffer, the first thing I want to do is go to OBS Studio, go to replay, and set replay state. In here, all I have to do is hit save, and what it's going to do is it's going to take the 30 seconds of video that just happened, and it's going to save it. That's all it needs to do. Now, I like to add a little bit of a delay just to make sure that things work a little fluidly. And the next thing we're going to wind up doing is, well, we're going to go into OBS Raw Generator, and I'm going to come down here to outputs. We have toggle replay buffer, get replay buffer status, start, stop, save. But this is what I'm looking for. Get last rebuffer replay. When you send a request, it's going to tell you exactly where a file sits. That last thing you just saved. What I'm going to do, I'm going to copy the OBS Raw to basically copy this. We're going to come down into our Streamer.bot, go to OBS Raw. We're going to paste this in, format it to make it look pretty, hit test, and it's going to show me the last one that was done. And this is where that path is. I'm going to hit OK. Let me go ahead and add a test trigger here, mainly for the simple fact, well, I like to see what I'm going to have back when it comes to the variables I have available to me. So when I go to my action history and look at what I just triggered, this is what I want, is OBS Raw.saved replay path. So I'm just going to right click, copy the variable name, and close this out. Let's go back. And the way I think, you don't actually have to do this part, but I like to set the argument, and I'm going to set this as replay to the value. Now, that is not necessary to do. You can actually pull from that OBS Raw, that variable, because it's already been supplied, and the next sub action will pick it up. I do this because in case I want to build something even further beyond what I'm doing now, I have access to something already that maybe I can work with and change a few things. I do this for my own kind of mind and how I think. You don't have to set the argument. So now that I've got that we have this argument in setting the replay path, we now have that pathway. Well, let's go back to our raw generator. And this is one of the fun things, is you can actually come up here then to your inputs, which is basically your sources. I want to do get input setting, and I want to do mute demo video. And that is what we have here in this source to tell us, okay, this is the source I want to get the information on. Okay, I'm going to jump in real quick because while I was editing this, I'm really just botched the hell out of the explanation of this. So let me explain. So when you're doing get input settings here, you're going to send the request and it's going to come back like this. This is how it should come back, is your input kind shows an FFmpeg source, the input settings showing local file and what that local file is. When you go to set input settings, what you need to pay attention to is the fact that the input settings part is already filled in here. So what you need to copy then is only what's within the input settings, which would be local file and that local file. So if I go in here to the JSON value, drop that in, curlies on the ends to give it the correct formatting, and then we can just do a true on the overlay, so that way it'll apply the settings over the existing ones, so that way if you have a looping video, it'll still continue to loop. So when I send the information, it should change to something different. So if I send, it sends and it changes the video. So I made a bit of a boo-boo there, but the important thing is that you're taking whatever is actually in the input settings and you're applying that, not everything that you're getting back. You only need to pay attention to those settings part because everything else has been filled in via OBS Raw. So now we're going to set up another OBS Raw, and I'm copying my OBS Raw that we did here where we're going to be setting our input settings. I'm going to paste it in here. We're going to format to make it cleaner. And then what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to just take out what's actually there. And instead, we're going to insert our variable like so. And then I'm going to hit OK. And you know what? Just for safety's sake, I'm going to duplicate this 100 milliseconds and put it right in between there, just again, to give us a little bit of that buffer room. So what we have then is we have our replay buffer going. This has been capturing all the stuff here on this screen that we haven't really been looking at. And so when I go in to Streamer.bot with what we just built for this replay, I hit test trigger and bam. What happens is it has just replaced that video file with the clip we just took. Essentially, what I just gave you is how to do an instant replay on your stream. It gives you so many possibilities and so many ways of opening up your stream to really reflect some amazing stuff. So now you have the ability to mute non-source things in your OBS. You can change the volume and do it in a way that actually makes sense by pressing a button multiple times. And well, now you can make a real instant replay that really doesn't take a whole lot. That's why OBS Raw really just unlocks so much more for you to work with and gives you the ability to really get creative with your streams and how you want to approach things. Now, I love to know if you have figured out a way to expand on it, or you found new ways of doing things, or you found this video helpful, whatever. I love seeing the comments pop up to let me know what directions you're going, how you've improved upon what I've shown you. Or if you have questions and you really just all went over your head, please reach out to me. Even if it's in the comment section, I will do my best to help you understand better. If nothing else, join me on my streams and ask me there, bug me. I will do everything I can to get you to understand. Of course, if you love to learn about these kinds of things and hopefully like, a guy who's super long-winded like me, hopefully you'll subscribe, keep following me to find out more tips and tricks like this and where I can hopefully break things down to make it easier for you. And with that, my friends, that's all I got for you today. I will catch you on my next video. I hope you enjoy putting together some amazing stuff now that you have some new knowledge.